is always the hard part. Get people to come in. Like I said, normally most of our events, we don't start with the networking because it's just too hard to get people to stop. Sorry?
You put together a lot of events.
Yeah, we do about, I would say, 40 a year in the academic year.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have
once a week.
Oh yeah, and we have 3 staff members.
Good.
How are you? Good. So we have a huge volunteer base. We could not do it without the volunteers. I mean, that's really what makes us tick. And we're working with some of the other chapters on. It's our 40th anniversary year, so we're all trying to do, something to just sort of showcase all the chapters here and internationally. So it's exciting. Yeah. Front and center. I like it.
I'm one of the students,
Yeah. Make sure you take notes.
Take notes, ask questions.
Ready? All right. Looks like we have critical mass, so I'm going to get started, and I'm going to be really quick so we can get to the content. Welcome, everybody. My name is Katya Wald. I'm the Executive Director here at the MIT Enterprise Forum of Cambridge. Just really quickly, I want to thank a few people. We can't do what we do without our annual sponsors, Witham, Chen PR, Hamilton Brooks, Smith Reynolds, Morris Barnes, Brown and Pendleton, and Wolf Greenfield all support a year-long's worth of events that we do from September to June. For those who has never been to one of our events before? All right, so there's a few of you, so you have to listen to my spiel. Our primary focus is to showcase emerging technologies. We really do believe that emerging tech can inspire innovation, and our larger events that we do over the year will expose you to what ideas just might become reality and how entrepreneurs can actually capitalize on them. We also coach and mentor. That is our primary mission. We have coaching programs for early stage entrepreneurs that are kept intentionally small to offer high-touch peer-to-peer learning. And we also match startups with experienced mentors. And we are part of MIT. We are the largest and founding chapter of the MIT Enterprise Forum, a global organization affiliated with MIT through MIT Technology Review, which is why we are doing tonight's event. And we're glad to have David here. Just a couple of quick upcoming events. We like to squeeze in a whole bunch before June 30th. So we have our Start Smart class for entrepreneurs starting May 21st. That's 8 classes on the nuts and bolts of starting your company. May 22nd, we have a VR partnerships event on teaming up. Will it actually build the category or become a distraction? We also, on May 30th, have something on blockchain technology, patents versus open source. And then our capstone event of the year is our Startup Spotlight. We have about 35 startups that will be demoing at District Hall. It's going to be a great event, food and drink, of course, and then what happens is we actually have the audience vote on their favorite categories. So future unicorn, company I want to have a beer with, and a couple of other categories. So it's really a lot of fun. With that, I'm going to keep quiet and introduce David Rotman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is David Rotman. I'm the editor of MIT Technology Review. So happy to be here and to share with all you the TR10 And I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, but I'm really looking forward to if we can have a discussion, question and answer afterwards about which ones you think are important, which ones you don't, or anything of that nature. I'm just really interested in getting your thoughts. So we do this, we choose a list of what we consider the most important technologies every spring. And we've been doing it since 2001. I've been doing it since 2001. So I've been doing all these issues. You can kind of blame me on them. And what do we look for? I think we look for a range of technologies from early stage research to stuff that's being commercialized to things that are already big infrastructure type things. So we look at the whole range. And what we're trying to say to our readers is that these are the most important ones that you should really focus on. These are not, the hottest new technologies or the ones, to invest. Many of them are core technologies, and these ones are core technologies that we feel you should really pay attention to, that are really, really important. So we choose it. We asked a lot of our experts about which ones they feel are important and get that feedback, and we do a lot of reporting on it. But really, as editors, as journalists, we sort of step back and say, of all the stories we've been writing about all year, which ones really reflect some of the important technologies. So our track record. This one is from 2001. This is Stephen Quake, who works in microfluidics. And we consider this a success story. This is now a pretty big market for microfluidics. But more important, I think, it turns out to be a core technology that has really enabled a lot of great research in other technologies. So I'm pretty proud of this one. Microfluidics in 2001 was really an early technology, kind of untested, and I think it has proven to be a really mainstay of a lot of genomic research. This is, at the time, this was a personal assistant at SRI, the research group in California. Turns out to be Siri. Later became Siri after Apple bought it. But this was before Apple had bought it, and we had sort of saw this really interesting personal assistant at SRI, and it works. And isn't that great? So another success. And now we all know, and another great success story. Sometimes things don't pan out, of course. This one is what we called social TV in 2010. And this really never got any traction, I think. It may or may not have been a good idea, but given the examples, maybe it's a good thing it never worked out, I'm not sure we ever needed it. So it's kind of, we take our chances, but this is our selection of 2018. We led off with 3D metal printing, and I think everyone here has probably heard a lot about 3D printing. And for many years, we kind of avoided putting 3D printing on the list because we did not feel it was becoming really a crucial technology. It was an interesting technology, a fascinating technology. But this year, we felt, because there were several new companies working on metals, that this really was a milestone in the development of 3D printing that would finally allow 3D printing to become part of the manufacturing cycle. So what you're looking at now is a sort of video of a 3D printer by a company called Desktop Metal, many of its founders have come out of MIT. They were a combination of material scientists, mechanical engineers, software engineers. And this is a 3D printer at work, metal printer at work. And one of the interesting things I think of this video is it just shows creating a 3D metal part is a whole process. It's not just a matter of printing it. You have to fire the metals. You have to, it's just a whole process. It takes understanding of the metallurgy and the whole process of it. So, but now for about 120,000, you can buy a 3D metal printer and make parts. And we feel it's still expensive, of course, but for a small business or a small manufacturer, it becomes practical. And why do you want 3D print a 3D metal part? Because you could, for example, not keep a large inventory of spare parts for an older car. Instead of having a warehouse of inventory, you go and print out the part. Or for a tractor that you may not have a part for, you can print out the part. And we feel eventually this could have a big impact of even how we think about manufacturing, that we could have much more distributed manufacturing, much more on-demand manufacturing, and much more sort of customizable manufacturing. This is an example of, I think, of quite an early research stage to our choice that we made. This is some research going at the University of Cambridge in the UK, in which the biologists created an embryo-like structure from stem cells. So no egg, no sperm, just stem cells plucked from an embryo that formed another embryo. So amazing stuff. It's very early. The reason they did it is that they were interested in how the early stages of how an embryo develops. So very much sort of a research project. And these, to be sure, these embryo-like structures could not grow into an animal. I think these were mice embryos, but they could not grow into mice. They're not viable. But you see where it's going. You see where we're headed on this. So we thought it was a really important thing to tell our readers about. Again, it's really a research project, but it has obvious ethical issues. This next one is we call it Sensing City. It's a project from Alphabet's Sidewalk Labs that they're proposing in Toronto. And this is I'm not quite sure you see it, but the property is a waterfront property, industrial property on the lakefront in Toronto that Sidewalk Labs wants to make into a sort of high-tech neighborhood. Autonomous cars, data sensing, knows where everyone is, know where you're going, where you've been. So, do we want that? So, I mean, lots of conveniences, lots of issues in terms of privacy, who controls, who has access to the privacy. And I think we've all heard a lot about smart cities over the last decade at least. This one we feel is probably going to happen, and they know sort of the concerns about privacy, and they're working quite closely with the city to try to overcome that. So we felt it was worth flagging. And again, I mean, we've seen numerous smart cities not succeed, and I think we kind of went there. We went to Toronto. We talked about how they're working with the community, and I think we found like, well, maybe this one will succeed. It has some, if they can cooperate with the community. AI for what we call AI for everybody, which is basically putting AI into the cloud. So we feel AI is really a transformative technology, but we also feel right now it's a hard technology for many companies, for many parts of the economy. You need great talent, you need expertise, you need to know how to do it. So by putting the AI into the cloud, making it much more accessible to much more many more companies, many more researchers, many more programmers, we feel is a quite sort of significant step in getting AI into the economy. This is what we call dueling neural networks. So we've written a lot about AI, and one of the most exciting new projects is called GANs, in which you use two neural networks to iterate through. One network tries to create an image, and the other network tells it, no, I know that's a fake. The first network tries again. Second network says, no, I know that's not real, that's a phony. And they keep iterating until basically the initial neural network has a convincing image that the second neural network cannot recognize as a fake. So why is this powerful? Because it allows a neural network to create images of things it has never seen before, but that are realistic and are based on real kind of images. So it can perhaps create a scene of a person on a bicycle in the snow. It may never had seen a person on a bicycle in the snow, but it knows what a person on a bicycle looks like. And by iterating through the possibilities with the other neural networks, it creates a quite realistic image. So we say it can acquire imagination. In other words, create images of things, visions of things that it has never seen before. Including we've probably seen some of these fake news, fake images of people that are quite actually realistic looking. So a bit scary. In the whole area of fake news, digital forgery, I think fakery is troubling in many ways. But on the other hand, GANs, what we call dueling neural networks, are really a major breakthrough in the development of AI. And as you see, some of the major AI players are working hard on it. Google, DeepMind, NVIDIA. These things we call Babel fish earbuds. These are Google's Pixel Buds, which are used for translation. So one person wears the earbuds, the other person has a phone, and they can go back and forth between different languages. One person can speak one language, it's translated into the phone. The second person speaks into her phone, is translated into the earbuds. So it's a much more sort of practical way to do real-time translation, because I can talk to a person back and forth without us both looking at a phone or both looking at a computer. And it works quite well. So we said the hardware is clunky and it will get better, so that doesn't really matter. But the underlying technology, which is built on machine learning, is quite amazing. And it's amazing not just for its ability to translate words, but also for speech synthesis, to reply in a language with a proper accent. So not easy stuff. And to me, being able to travel somewhere where different languages spoken, and to be able to walk around and actually communicate to people is quite an amazing feat. So these are Google earbuds, but also Baidu is working on it. And they're available now. The next one is what we call zero carbon natural gas, which is a power plant being built outside of Houston in the Houston Ship Channel. They re-engineered it to make it much more effective, much cheaper in their ability to capture the carbon emissions from it. And why we feel it's important is about 30% of the U.S. electricity and 22% of the world's electricity is made using natural gas. So it's cleaner than coal in terms of carbon emissions, but it's not that clean, and it's still a great source of carbon emissions. But we're stuck with natural gas for the foreseeable future, and so how do we make natural gas power plants cleaner? How do we capture the carbon? And so this is, I think, quite important if we can make it work and make it work cheaply enough to be competitive. So again, an example of, I told you at the beginning we tried to do early research. You saw the artificial embryos. Now here's an example of actually a power plant that's up and running, or is about to be up and running. Fairly, not large scale, but fairly large scale plant. I guess it'll be up and running in 3 to 5 years. The next one is a tool that came out of the blockchain community that allows you to share just the information you need for a given transaction. So you can prove that you're over 18 without revealing where you were born or your date of birth or any other private information. You can reveal to someone you have enough money in the bank to cover a transaction without telling the person how much money you have in the bank or what bank it is or what your account, but you can prove the relevant fact for a particular transaction. So important because reduce the risk of fraud, exposing yourself to identity theft, and just for privacy reasons. As you can see, it came out of Zcash, but JP Morgan, some of the big banks are interested in this. The next one we call genetic fortune telling. As many of you probably know, it turns out that many common diseases are caused by a large number of variants. So it's not, the hope that we once had that you could find a gene that caused a common disease isn't really true, isn't panning out. And it's a common disease, many common diseases are caused by a large combination of genetic variants. But what people have been able to do recently because of the very large DNA studies is to be able to identify these maybe hundreds of variants that are common to a disease and begin to create a profile for an individual saying, you have all these variants, here's your risk of heart disease or diabetes or a mental disorder. One of the leading places doing this photo is of the UK Biobank, which has 500,000 DNA samples donated by British volunteers. And what's really allows the power of these studies is that they have these DNA samples, but they also have the medical history of these patients. So they can combine the knowledge about the DNA samples with the medical history and begin to sort of gain insight into what genes are tied to which diseases. It's not really cause and effect, but you can begin to say, okay, those 150 genetic variants give you a higher risk of diabetes or heart disease. All sorts of questions about this, as this slide points out, because it's not just for diseases. They're beginning to think about how to do this with personality traits. So if it uses the example of IQ, I think another example they're looking at genes that make people prone to anxiety or certain other behaviors. And so you can begin to see where that goes if you can create a scorecard profiling some of the behavioral traits of people. As you see, lots of people working on this. This is a final one, the last of the TR10. I told you some of these were very early stage research. This one is extremely early, but I think quite amazing. It's one of my favorites. It's about using quantum computing to model in drug discovery, material science. And so the idea is quantum computers are very good at simulating the electrons of a molecule. And using conventional computers is really difficult to know exactly where the electrons of even a fairly large molecule, a fairly simple molecule is. And so that restricts chemists and material science and drug discovery people from really creating really new, it's a limitation in discovering new materials and new compounds. So some of the applications we were thinking about were better batteries, new electrolytes for better batteries, compounds that can turn sunlight directly into liquid fuels, better catalysts, better enzymes for photosynthesis. All these things that if the chemists and material science could truly understand the structure of the molecule in great and precise detail, it would really open things up. So, told you it was early stage. The example we pointed to was a molecular simulation of a very simple 3-atom molecule, but precisely identifying the molecular structure of that molecule. IBM, Google, and this work was done at some researchers at Harvard. So again, very early, but I think a window on where it could eventually go, one of the most promising applications of quantum computing. That's it.
Thank you, David. We have another 15 minutes for Q&A if anybody has questions for David before we break for networking. Questions?
Please.
Dave, are any of the representatives that are involved in these technologies, are they here tonight in this room? Like people that work for the company, for the metal turkey, for example?
I don't believe so, but yeah, it's a good. What's that?
We're early investors in desktop metal.
And Desktop Metal. So you said he was an early investor. You want to say why you're investing in them?
So, Rick Fulop had started the company. This was he was the GP at Northbridge, which was earlier. So Jamie Holstein was also a GP at Northbridge. So they knew each other from the past. And so Jamie had been working with the professors for a while. He knew them. And then when you got like Rick's operational expertise come in, then that company could really take off. And they've been doing phenomenally well. They just raised like a very, very large round fairly recently. So we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it's a great, interesting company. One of the reasons that attracted us to it is, I think I said when I was showing this slide, they got some of the top people in material science, mechanical engineering, software programming, because it takes all those expertise to come together and create these new products. And they have a desktop version, but they also have a much larger production version, which they hope to get out into the manufacturing environment to actually make things fast enough and large enough that would be practical for manufacturing. Sir?
Yes, I see a number of different industries, and I was wondering, in terms of background for these choices, did you have articles that were written about these various companies and technologies? Were they written up? Are you from the magazine that's associated with MIT? And what I'm wondering is, how can I read more in a very easy way? That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. So I think the question was, do we write about these technologies on a more frequent basis?
Do you write about them, and are those articles
And
available in publications?
they are, okay. And are the articles available? Can you read more about them? Is basically, I think, the question. And the answer is yes. So what we try to choose are things that we often write about. That these are meant to be things that we consider the most important breakthroughs of the year. So these are the things that we've been writing about all year, things that we've been covering. So I think if you go to our website, you can easily just search for some of these different topics, and you'll not just get this year's stories, but some of these things, 3D printing, quantum computing, we've been covering for years now, and I think you could get a good sense of why these particular projects stand out.
Can you talk about the methodology that you use for selecting these top 10 technologies? Like how you arrive at these 10?
So the question is, how do we choose these 10 technologies? Which is a really, I think, a great question. Because I'm up here saying these are the most important, and I'm sure people are thinking, like, why do you say that? Or, you know. We talk to a lot of people, and the actual process is that I ask the editors and the writers, what are the most important stories you've been writing about this year? And that begins maybe I think this year it began in November. It began around Thanksgiving. We get a long list of a bunch of stuff. We get looking at it and say, which ones do we feel are really important, really will have an impact, on long-term impact on the different industries? Which ones, and try to avoid sort of the hot topic of the day. We get feedback from experts in the particular field, say if it's on 3D metal printing, what do people in the field think about it? So we get that feedback. And then as journalists, we just sit down with that list and say, here's our best guess. We feel these are really important, and this is why. So it's not a scientific process by any means. It's really a informed, I would call it, journalistic process. Sure.
Question from the live stream. The Babel headphones, when do you think those will be commercialized, and when can we start translating in real time?
Those are out there. Those are commercially available. Yes. I'm not sure. They came out I'm guessing last fall or late fall. I'm not sure when, but they are certainly commercially available.
Piggybacking off of the earlier question about how you pick the technologies.
Yes.
Doing this for 17 or 18 years, as you look back at your predictive track record, have you kind of changed at all how you think about which technologies make the list? And if so, what kinds of things do you weight more heavily now than you did before, and which things do you weight less heavily now than you did before?
So I think the question, if I can paraphrase, is when you go back to the list, how has your selection changed? How has your criteria changed according to your track record? I think the sort of the process has not changed that much. I think over time we've shifted maybe more towards some of the ones that you saw now are industrial projects, the natural gas power plant for sure, and some of these larger. So we've become aware that we should include some larger projects that are actually on the ground being built. Pixel Bud, the translation earbuds, is another example of we include more consumer products now than we used to. Why? Just because I think we're aware that these products can have amazing technologies in them. When I go back to the earlier list, though, I feel many of those technologies really hold up well. Before this meeting, I kind of looked back in 2001, and there were things like distributed data storage. So we probably wouldn't call it now that, but it's basically the cloud or some form of the cloud. So I think what we've done best at is identify sort of enabling technologies, and they may develop and and become sort of called something different or become a different version over the years. But I think what our track record is good at is sort of identifying like microfluidics, early enabling technologies. Just
I'm not sure my recollection is right, but I think last year there were more technologies on the list that were not available now. 9 out of 10 today were available now. Is that a switch, or am I misremembering?
So the question, are there more on the list now that are available than the last couple of years? I'm sure you're remembering correctly. I wouldn't, I doubt, but it's not intentional. What we look for is early research. Things like the pixel bud that are actually you can available now. You can go out and buy them, and others like the artificial embryo, and actually the quantum computing materials research. Those are both very early, and I guess you could say it's available now. They're out there, but we're looking at for quantum material research on new materials. It's a decade from now before you would ever see anything come out of that. Sir.
Except for that list, except for the zero emission power plant, it struck me that all of those technologies, they will benefit people who are already wealthy and traveling the world and things like that. Is that a reflection of your methodology, or just where breakthroughs are coming, or why is there nothing on the list for people who are not worried about translating languages, but drinking clean water, or eating enough, or getting enough?
Yeah. So this is a great question, and if I could paraphrase it, is why don't we select more technologies that have applications throughout different parts of the world, and not just some of these look very familiar like to us or from Silicon Valley, and why don't we have a broader range of technology? And I think that is a great critique. I don't have a ready answer. I think there should be more. Yes, it's a great comment, though. Sir.
So to kind of piggyback on that question, do you get into like potential industries that are impacted by these things? Because you were talking about like the generative adversarial network, and there's a great piece that just came out about how that can get better at diagnosis by scraping EHR data. And so like seeing the example that you provided, I'm wondering if yes, that technology can be applied to healthcare data and potentially impact a much wider audience that's not commercial product.
Right. So the question was, how do we think about sort of different industries, different applications of these things as they play out? If that's fair summary. So I think of it as these are just a continuum in our coverage. So we're very interested in how GANs will affect biological research, how it will affect all material science research. And so if we do it properly, we're continuing to follow these technologies as they begin to get out in industry and begin to get out in different applications and ask the questions that you're asking.
So you mentioned the digital identity, use blockchain. People have been get used to the medium for like a middleman for all these years. So which industry you think will most likely attract the early adopters?
So the question was on the zero, on the privacy one, which industries would be most interested?
Yeah,
Early adopters. I am not an expert on this. I would be quick to say. I would think it would be financial transactions, but that's what I'm going based on our story. But I'm not. I don't pretend to know that much about it. To me, it makes sense. I mean, you saw some of the people involved in developing it was J.P. Morgan, another big bank. So I think there is in the financial community interest. So the question is on the DNA database. Are, who is the database available to? And that's a great question. My understanding is that these, and I could be wrong, and people in this room probably know better than I, I'm sure know better than I, that these databases are available to researchers across different communities, was my understanding. And that's one of the powers of them, is that they're getting out into the hands of researchers that look at different types of diseases, and they can use that data to begin forming some of these profiles. So my understanding is that they are getting out into the hands of not just the people creating the databases, but the whole community looking at diseases.
But the HIPAA rules apply for research.
Sure, of course. Any ones that people take issue with that you were?
Sure.
Yes.
Why don't we have a lively discussion on the one that cities, or you mentioned that they can check the license plates. Now, I know of a system that's like what you described, that's in another country, and the ramifications are enormous. If someone can track you throughout the day, you go back to the founders of the Constitution, they felt, based on their own experience, that privacy is the best way to go.
Right.
Has your magazine discussed that issue?
So the question is, in terms of the sensing city, what do we think about the privacy issues raised with collecting data and basically knowing everything about you? First point, we pick these as ones that we feel are important that our readers should know about. We don't necessarily endorse it. And we do discuss a lot about the privacy issue, and I think one of the reasons that we thought it was a good idea to write about Sensing City is that these privacy issues are playing out in Toronto as the community looks at the technologies and asks themselves, do we really want this in our community? So we'll see. But I think that's the place that needs to decide, is the community, whether they want the technology.
I would just like to add to your answer. You also talked about zero knowledge proofs.
Mm.
It's in my humble opinion, I believe that these kind of issues of privacy, it's basically the smart city is nothing but a collection of data. And with blockchain, we have a entirely new way to collect and save those data. And with zero knowledge proof, we can probably address those privacy concerns.
Great. So the comment was about privacy and zero knowledge proofs, and maybe there's a way to have all this data on people and yet protect people's privacy. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, because you talked about the Google earbuds and you talked about yourself being impressed and kind of wanting to use them, and you talk about the freedom it would give you. Have you asked yourself the question regarding quality control? Is it being applied? Are they being looked at from that sense?
The question was about the earbuds, the translation earbuds, and quality control. What?
How do you know that what the earbuds are
Oh, how?
is actually accurate?
That's a great question. How do you know the translation is accurate? I guess you don't know, do you? I would think maybe your answers to the other person might kind of. Yes.
But is the magazine, looking through that lens and saying, well, wait a minute, we want to know that you're actually accurate?
Yeah. So obviously accuracy is a big issue here, and translation is hard. But I did meet the person at Google that was largely responsible for creating this technology, and how they do it is with machine learning and AI, and it's getting better and better and better and better very quickly, and it's because they're able to train AI systems on more and more data, and it's actually getting very, very good very quickly, is my understanding. One of the bigger issues is which languages it can train on. And some languages are much more available because there are much more examples on the web which they need to train on. And so I think one of the issues is, can it translate certain languages that there's not much presence on the web, and can it be expanded to have a broader reach throughout different parts of the world? One more question or comment, if there is one. So.
A couple of questions. One was, this year's interactive, like moving forward, do you ever fix the same one again, so certain technologies kind of more qualified? And then also, if you go back, there was a few years to kind of see how it progressed. And the second, do you have like an honorable mention list? Like robots, anything better than get AI than physical robots, which is pretty relevant.
So there's two questions. One, do we have an honorary list of runners-up? And the answer is no, but it's a great idea. And maybe we could do it next year, because I think it is interesting, ones that just didn't quite get there because there's only 10, but there's a list of very interesting runners-up, I know, from working on the list. Second part of the question was, do we track them? And not formally, but constantly looking back and seeing, trying to learn from whether we really chose the right technologies or not. So not formally track them, but I think trying to learn our lessons. And I can go back certain times when we went wrong and try to avoid those, and other times when we really did it right and learn why we were better at those guesses.
I just want to add a comment. It's a great choice that your group has made. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks everyone here for your interest, and appreciate it.
So thank you, David. I'm doing the live stream now. I just want to invite everybody. There's more drink. We put more food out. So enjoy, network, talk about the technologies. David's going to stick around, so feel free to chat with him. Oh, and Amy says pick up your garbage. So thank you very much for coming.